Today I'm joined by Jack Kidd again. Welcome, Jack. And also Joseph Gregory Hallett. This is part two. This is our opportunity now today, after the first part, part one, to actually put some meat on the bones and find out more information based on the questions that we've received in respect to the first part. So, Jack, I'm going to hand over to you to ask the questions. But welcome, Greg, and welcome, Jack.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlie. It's been so exciting doing the videos with you the past few weeks, and here we are again. So, Greg, that was fantastic. The interview, it's really good fun. We've had a lot of positive response. People saying the most wonderful things online. And amazingly, we've had 11,000 people in the last 48 hours watch the video.
Wow.
So we got a lot of interest, and people are absolutely fascinated in your story, and can't wait to dig deeper and take it to the next level. One thing of slight concern is you've got a couple of sisters that seem to be causing a little bit of havoc, whether through jealousy or just being nasty sisters. I don't really understand, but could you possibly explain why your sisters are attacking you?
They always have. They always have. And part of the story, part of the prophecy is kept in fairy tales. And the fairy tale we're looking at now being fulfilled is Cinderella, right? The two ugly sisters. So I'm going for the throne, and I've got two ugly sisters and an evil mother who are trying to draw me back, sabotage me, do everything they can so I can't get to Buckingham Palace throne room, right? They just don't want it to happen because it shows up all of their evil negativity. Now, I was born the Mashiach, which is Hamashiach, which means that I was born on the predicted date for the King of Israel, right? And that's in my documents, and it's all been accepted by the Queen and the royal family and the Prime Minister of Israel, POTUS and Putin, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? So that made me a notable from a very early age. So the Elizabeth and Philip are in charge of heroin trafficking, and they target heroin at anyone who's fulfilling the royal predictions, right? So my brother and two sisters were heroin users. My brother is still a career drug user from a young age, and I've got two really ugly sisters. My brother said to me once, he said, "You realize your two sisters are throwbacks?" And I said, "What's a throwback?" And he says, "When they come out of the womb, you want to throw them back in, right?" Whoa, yeah. So, so I've got two ugly sisters who are they've always kind of just haunted me, and basically, you know, they've put out a video which I haven't been able to see yet because it appears that I'm the only person who's blocked from seeing that video. But they're saying no, he's not this, not royals, no. And then my brother's apparently putting up that he's the King of England. You know, so it's like they can't even work together. They've had so much drugs, right?
Just one quick thing though, you haven't actually seen them for how many years?
Quarter of a century. I've stayed away from them for over a quarter of a century, since 1993.
Wow.
Yeah, so
they've got to say for themselves, considering they haven't spoken to you for a quarter of a century.
Well, they're talking like they know me. Like I'd written 10 books before they even knew I was an author.
Wow.
No? And I was an architect, and they wouldn't acknowledge that I was an architect. You know, I got a degree in architecture, and none of them turned up to the ceremony.
Wow.
It's like just sabotage, you know?
Okay.
In every way, and on every level, and all the time. So I haven't seen them for a quarter of a century. They're ugly. They're two ugly sisters, and they get no attention. So as soon as I get my first spike of attention, which has gone, my website's gone from 10 hits a day to, I don't know, 90,000 or something a day. It's just, we've had to pull in more cash, separate the documents out to Amazon S3, stop selling the books on the site, get all the other sites away from it, and buy another site for all of the other sites, and then just have my site and one other, because I've had so much interest, and I've had over 4,000 friends in the last 4 days. Right, I've now got 4,000 new friends, and some of my videos from 2 weeks ago are getting 80,000 hits already.
We should say 4,000 friends on Facebook rather than new friends, yeah?
No, 4,000 new friends on Facebook.
New friends, that's what I mean.
Friends, absolutely new friends. So I've just been spending my time clicking, searching, are they an agent? If they've got no photos that show up or no friends that show up, they're an agent, I delete them. So those people know why they're deleted. And I've been trying to delete my family for a quarter of a century, but they keep just hanging on and just coming up with all this bullshit story, just following me around spreading rumors.
Yeah.
And it's really horrible, but it is the fulfillment of the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
And my mother's equally as evil, and they would just sabotage everything I did. And then my brother, who was a drug dealer from the age of 15, but he's actually using drugs from the age and kind of getting trained by the government as a drug dealer from the age of 10. What he'd do is I'd be an architect in town, and he would come in from Australia, and he would borrow my car and drive around, and it was a white Mercedes, so it was really obvious. It's the old 280E, and he would sell drugs to teenagers, and then hand the car back to me in the morning, or just basically put the keys back where they were and not tell me. And then all these women would go, "Oh, we're not using you as an architect because you're a drug dealer." And I'm going, "I'm not a drug dealer."
Yeah.
But he was using my car, right, to sell drugs, which meant that I couldn't get any work in that town.
Okay.
That sort of sabotage, right? Yeah. And my elder sister is possessed, right? She's actually a witch. She laughs like a witch, and she stabbed herself in the eye with a knitting needle and went right through the pupil. And then she, a few years later, she got a pair of scissors, and she's going for me like the scissors got to here, and my brother's hand comes in and grabs her hand, right? And then the whole family, this is when I'm like 12, the whole family 14, the whole family split up. We boarded her, and then we all left the city and drove 4 hours away, lived 4 hours away from her because she's so possessed. Right? And so and my other sister, Tam, is like, I didn't know what gender she was. Right? My friends would come around, my rowing friends, because I was on the senior 8 rowing and the senior 4 and the senior A basketball, and I was the top point scorer of the second 15 and that. And all my buddies would come around and they go, "Oh, I had a chat to your brother." I go, "What?" And we have a sister. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know, And she's slow, she was slow. She was, I was in the A stream, and she was in the, just above the ones that walk.
The entry level.
The ones that walk like this, She's an
I think we've established why they're having a dig. So if we can move on from there,
please.
The journey.
So basically what was happening is that Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth II were the biggest heroin suppliers on the planet, and they were targeting our family with heroin from a very young age. And the people that were organising children to be drug dealers was the Minister of Broadcasting, Sir Roger Douglas, right? And he was actually charged for pedophilia by his stepson in 1999, and instead of getting convicted of pedophilia, he got a traffic fine and was given a knighthood.
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So that's what we're up. That's what we're up against. So people say, "Oh, what do we need to change?" Everything,
yeah.
the whole thing, the whole gamut. Everything's being flipped. Well, literally, everything's being flipped as we speak.
If we start with the line, the bloodline, and the to clarify the line, Jack, you can sort of.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what your sort of plan is for Ascension, and regarding registering the documents, presenting the documents, how long this might take. So it's.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. People say, When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And that's just like a way of not looking for the signs. And the Bible says, look for the signs, to see the signs. We're going to give you signs, but we're not going to give you signs forever. You've got to notice the signs. So the signs now are that we've had to move the legal documents from our website to Amazon S3 because we're getting 100,000 downloads a day on the documents, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, so the documents are seen and people are looking at them and they're going, actually, these stand up. You know?
So you've got to take them and get them notarized or what?
Well, I used to take these documents to get notarized, and I've got 600 pages of documents that I took through the Queen's Bench High Court. I was getting those notarized, and then it came to the point where I was trying to get notarized the royal family tree, which was the true royals and then all the fake royals.
Yeah.
With me in there, and the notary said, I can't do this, and he pushed it back to me. And then when we were going to leave, he said, I can't do this because I swear 2 oaths to the Queen, and this is my income.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And so then I had to get multiple signatories, like 3 or 9 or 12 or 24, right? And then post them to those named, the respondents, which includes the Queen. And so what the beauty of that was, I'd send them to POTUS, the President Donald John Trump, and I'd send them to the Queen. So POTUS would get them a few days after the Queen, and he'd bring up the Queen or contact the Queen through, diplomatic channels and say, is this true? Is there any bit of it you want to deny? And she'd just be tight-lipped. She couldn't deny anything. So she went into hiding, and Trump just took over the British Empire until I move in. Basically what's happening.
Well, it's all just working together, because that's exactly, what Trump and Q and the White Hats and Patriots are doing. It's tearing their association with the treaties that were signed in 1720, which basically enslaved the American nation into slavery under the monarchy, to the point that all the taxes from America were being sent to the City of London and then siphoned to the Vatican. And so it's all just working together. I mean,
yeah, but it is fantastically working together. And like you were talking earlier off screen about relative is a 33-degree Mason and living on Malta. So what I managed to do with the Total Christ was execute the Knights of Malta out of the Vatican, and they're in charge of the world's money supply.
Yeah.
And then Trump took note of that because it's in my documents, and that happened at the exact same time that I did it in 2014, but it happened in from election day, November 2016, to his inauguration, 20th of January 2017, like simultaneously. And that allowed President Donald John Trump to absorb the Fed into the Treasury with him as the Treasury, head of the Treasury.
Yeah.
Right. So I've achieved that. And the Vatican's now no longer in control of money supply. And I am affirmed, confirmed, and certified with the Total Christ by the Pope, who's then done it in action and named me on Easter Friday. And then before that, he's closed down the whole world for Lent. Yeah. Closed down the whole world for Lent. And that means that I own everything the Vatican does. And he's also abdicated his title, Vicar of Christ. So I'm currently the owner of the world.
Just one point there with regard to the Vatican.
Yeah.
That I know from my sources,
Yeah.
the Pope and 350 members of the Vatican staff have been arrested and charged and are currently all under license. The Pope is currently at his holiday residence, not in the Vatican.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's being guarded there. But
Yeah.
I was told that that information would not be made public until
Well,
around...
that's a shame. That's a shame
Yeah.
that it wouldn't be made public.
Yeah. It was a bit of a giveaway that he was a hologram on
BBC Public.
the Easter speech was a hologram, wasn't it?
Well, they were saying that it's a hologram thing, but it was actually, I think it was really him, and then it was just, they just took out that much of the footage and still had the text running below the screen. So they edited that much of the footage out. They took it to there, stopped it, and then put in the previous footage.
Well, my people were saying that he wasn't in the Vatican on that day. He was in his holiday residency. He's actually in the house.
Was that Friday or Sunday?
He'd been there for at least a week before that. He's under house arrest in his holiday home rather than in the.
Yeah. Well, see, what he's doing is with that hologram, that so-called hologram thing, is he is showing you that he's vacated the position, Vicar of Christ, and they've closed down the world for Lent, and they've named the Christ as Joseph Gregory, elder brother Nick, who's a herbalist of the day, and I've got an elder brother Nick, and he's a drug dealer.
Yeah,
has been all of his life, you know. So they're naming me. So in the video, I went, "Yeah, my elder brother's a herbalist, but he's not. He's a drug dealer."
So if you're,
what do you say? What can you do? You know, families cover it up and go, "He's a druggie," and they go, "Oh, he's such a nice guy. He's a druggie. He carries a pistol." You know?
So if you're Joseph Gregory, where does the title King John III come from?
Well, we had King John of England, who's my ancestor. He's my great times 22 grandfather.
Okay.
And then we had Prince Marcos Manuel, who's King John II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And now we've got myself, which is King John III. Now, to carry the title King John of England or any related aspect, you have to be the Sangreal or the Christ. Right? Only the Sangreal can hold the title King John of England. And because my co-author was the Sangreal, I gave him the Duchy of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, which is 0.2% of Germany. It's got 13 castles, including the Diet, which is the old Parliament. And he gave me King of England and said, "Go to England, take your chances." So here I am.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Christ and King, you know, Christ and King. And the Pope's acknowledged Christ, and Christ means joins kingdoms and joins time. And I had to join kingdoms. I had to join Germany in order to get access to Thuringia, which is the most southwestern portion of the Eastern Bloc in Germany, because that held Coburg and Gotha and some of the lands of Saxe.
Sure.
In order to get access to the files and whether people were alive or not. And then one of them died around 1989, and then that transferred it to Francisco. No?
You mentioned last time that you had in your possession the sword.
Well, I was given the sword. I don't have it with me. I was given the sword, and I gave it back, which they thought was quite amazing.
Okay. So who's in possession of the sword now?
I can't say. I just don't want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, we have stuff all over the place, literally.
Okay. That's a fair comment.
But is it from the Prince Marcos Manuel line? It's the
sword it's the sword of Duke Ernst II of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha. So it's the sword of the Duchy of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, 0.2% of England, 0.2% of Germany, and the 13 castles and the massive amounts of land. And it's basically kind of what, you know, World War I was a lot about that, and getting rid of all the kingdoms in Germany was about that.
But you have the documentation to back that up as well.
I've got photos of me with the sword.
Yeah.
I've got photos of me holding it. I was actually given the sword of the Duchy of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha on Leap Day 2012 and instructed to sleep with it and then hold it up to the castle in the morning. And that was Moorish Castle in Sintra. Okay. I'm occasionally repeating words if I get a ping, right? Yeah. So I slept with the sword. It's great. It's a beautiful sword. It's about 3 foot long, and it's an ornate sword. It's got a bit curved. It's got a bloodline running through it, and it's got engraving all the way down it, and it's got a lovely handle, and it's got the right crest for the Duke of Saxon-Coburg and Gotha, right? So I sleep with it, roll over, sleep with it, and then I get up in the morning and I hold it up to Moorish Castle, which is the castle that held giants, and giant remains were found there, which is a king-making mark. and Moorish is the root word of mulberry, and King David, or David, hid under the mulberry tree twice. So that was my initiation into the house of David via the bowels, which means via secondary means, which means via initiation, not the bloodline.
Yeah.
Because the bloodline, no one knows where it is. So I was initiated into the house of David with the sword of the Duke of Saxon, Coburg and Gotha. Right? So gave it back the next day, and then I was elevated to Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of England, Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of Scotland, Lord Chancellor of Northern Ireland, Lord Chancellor of the Duchy of Saxon, Coburg and Gotha, and Lord Chancellor of the Principality of Hanover, as well as Arch Treasurer, Guardian of the Royal Secret.
Okay. It's also probably interesting.
That's a mouthful.
It's probably interesting at this stage also to go over what we discussed earlier about the Earl of Loudon, which was a sort of story put out by Michael Atney Hastings that was covered by, I think it was Tony Robinson, wasn't it, that did a story?
Yeah.
And that's quite important in this whole picture to clarify why that was done.
Yeah, well, he's claiming that he was from a line of Plantagenets, I think.
Yeah, we're also from Plantagenets and Tudors. So remind me later there. So what is the question?
The question was, because obviously there was a television series or something.
Oh yeah, that. Okay. So they're trying to say that, what was it, Edward IV was illegitimate, something like that?
The 14th Earl of Loudon and the 15th Earl of Loudon or something, which were the descendants.
Yeah. What people don't realise, well, Anthony Robinson is a cross-dresser, so he's a bit of a queen. And Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip have been employing people to make fake claims and weak claims to the throne. And his TV program came out in 2004. Now, and just to make that short of that, a birth is 40 weeks plus or minus 18 days.
Yeah.
Right? So that allowed for the conception, and that there were French people in the English court trying to sabotage the English lineage and pull the carpet from under its credence.
Okay.
Right? So there were all sorts of machinations going in the castle. So the French were saying, well, it wasn't there on that date, but, it's plus or minus 18 days, so that's sufficient. And they go, he looks like the arrow guy, but, there's no, the archer, but there's no image of the archer, I don't think. So it was, on that count, it was unconvincing. But, there has been an enormous amount of illegitimacy from Queen Victoria on. Like, her 9 children were all illegitimate, and Edward VII was illegitimate. Prince Albert was illegitimate. He's married to Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
Her son Edward VII was illegitimate. George V was illegitimate. He was the son of Tsar Alexander the Third of Russia. And Queen Elizabeth is illegitimate. She's the daughter of Winston Churchill and Elizabeth Bowes Lyons' maid. Prince Charles was born the royal runt. He was a child sex slave for Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was extorting them for their illegitimacy. Prince Charles, the royal runt, is actually the son of Elizabeth and Philip, and so is Anne, but Prince Andrew is the son of Lord Porchester, who was in the triumvirate, the heroin trafficking triumvirate. And Prince Edward is the son of Lord Plunket, who was also in the heroin trafficking triumvirate. So the heroin trafficking triumvirate was Prince Philip, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Lord Porchester, and Lord Plunket. Yeah. And they were trafficking heroin. And in order to keep Elizabeth quiet, Elizabeth was the heroin trafficking mole, and she would have children with the other people in the triumvirate to keep her quiet, right? So Lord Porchester's trafficking the heroin to fund his horses, and he would have a child with Elizabeth. They were lovers anyway, and that would keep her quiet. And then Lord Porchester was trafficking heroin. Lord Plunket was trafficking heroin, and he had a child with Elizabeth as well, and that kept her quiet. So what you've actually got in the illegitimate royal family that you've got now is a heroin trafficking unit with a whole lot of illegitimate children running around, and nothing royal about it whatsoever, and it's just a mafia. And it was those same people that attacked my family with heroin and got it to all my brothers and sisters, blacklisted my father, and my mother was on Mother's Little Helper from when I was the age of 8. So I, you know, it kind of blanks her. So I kind of didn't know her. You know, she's just a vacant space, vacant lot. So, and that's what they do. You know, they drug up the royals and they target all the true royal blood all around the world with heroin, right? And they're quite pinpoint targets. Like my neighbour was, well, the main heroin traffickers in New Zealand were Peter Williams, who was the president of the Law Society, and he was bringing in the heroin and the drugs in the closest harbour to me, Warkworth, Lee Harbour. And then when I moved to Auckland, they started to bring the drugs into Auckland Harbour. Then when I moved to Tauranga, they started to move the drugs into Tauranga Harbour. And I used to watch the heroin being dumped off the ocean liner. It's like you get an ocean liner and it's got a trap door on the side, right, about 2 floors up, 2 decks up. And that would open and a pallet would come out with jerry cans attached to it with the heroin in it, and they would just get thrown out and the door would get closed. And then there would be 2 guys in a Parker Craft, aluminium boat, aluminium dinghy, you know, that fit on the back of a car trailer. And they would be in diving suits and they would go out and they would bring the pallet back, and then they didn't time it right. They kind of maybe should have done it at low tide. They did it at high tide, and this is in Beach Road in Tauranga. And excuse me, the water goes from 1 inch to 4 inches over 400 yards. So that meant that at high tide, they had to drag the pallet and the boat for the last 400 meters.
Wow.
Right? And there's actually hot water that comes out there from bubbles from under the ground too. It's quite nice. And one of the people who were dragging it out, I later identified as he had robbed the BNZ Bank in Bulls in 1954 with Peter Williams and one other. And I got a full confession from one of the bank robbers before he died. So they would take the heroin and they would put it in the back of a Land Rover with an open tray on it with that sort of stainless steel with the stairway pattern, the grip pattern on it, if you know the ones. Yeah. And then so the 6 guys would be sitting on the back there, and there'd be the trailer and the boat and the heroin, and then take it up to Winston Peters' place.
Okay.
Right? And 5 years later, he would become the MP. 4 years later, he would become the MP for Tauranga. And the house actually overlooked the harbour, so they could see when the ocean liner was coming in and dropping the heroin. And Peter Williams, who's the president of the Law Society, was living with Winston Peters. So they got the same name, Winston Peters, Peter Williams. It's like a reverse name. And the house was overlooking the harbour, and they shared the same legal office in Tauranga, and they never practiced law. They just watched the heroin, right? And the heroin trafficking mole was Henny Phillips, who was Winston Peters' girlfriend, and she ended up becoming Peter Williams' common law wife. So we're talking about, you know, the most powerful lawyers and politicians in New Zealand, and they're openly bringing heroin in. And I just happened to be the gardener next door as well, who was a relative of Winston Peters, so next door but one. So, you know, I used to get the full story from her as a 15-year-old, right? But not only was I standing there watching the heroin come in for like 5 or 10 minutes at a time, you know, it would take them like 10, 15 minutes. They were noticing who I was, and I was actually the target of the heroin.
Right.
You know, it's funny how things work out, you know?
Yeah, no, it's bizarre. And what's rolling out in America now is it's becoming very clear that the CIA over the last 40 years have become unbelievably top-end drug dealers, and they were financing their covert operations through the sale of cocaine, and their planes were being shot down full of coke. And there have been some whistleblowers who have just gone, look, I joined the CIA, and they're just terrorists and drug dealers. Flick that back 100 years, and you've got people of power controlling the drugs, because it's easy money, and they use their power, and it's really horrible. And all of these corrupt people have crept up to positions of power. They're the people that have done terrible things. Unless you do a terrible thing, I don't think you can be a politician, because they can't control you.
Yes. Well, Winston Peters' entry into the heroin trafficking gang in New Zealand was to do a double murder and murder Harvey and Jeanette Crew.
It's no wonder that Donald Trump wants to drain the swamp, is it?
Yeah, it's horrible. It's just horrible. But the British Royal Navy come up to me and they say, we are absolutely sick of transporting the Queen's heroin around. That's all we do.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Anyway, it's all over, man.
Have you got
Trump's winning, and we've got King John III ready to go.
Yeah, well, it's happening. People say, when's it happening? When's it happening? And I'm going, it just happened. Like 5 minutes ago, yesterday, taking the emblem off the palace, taking the emblem off 10 Downing Street, and photo montaging my emblem on there, and people are going, is that real? Is that real? Is that real? So they took it off so that I could do that.
This has been a fabulous second part to this, and I think we should do a third part as well to go even further. But after the first one, we got a lot of questions which we covered today, and I think we can then cover. Have you got any more questions, or have we done that, Jack?
No, just other than I think the next step is we've got to somehow get to Buckingham Palace so we can prove all this up and get in the right rooms. Yeah.
No one living there. It's just been renovated for me. And you've just had like 2 months off, March, April, May. You just had 2 months off to paint all of the United Kingdom for me. And let the paint smell go away, so I can just drive through my carriage and wave, and everything's painted, and the palace is all done up.
Well, that's been a fabulous little chat, and this is the end of part 2, and we will come back to you with part 3 very, very soon. But thank you very much for today, for Greg, and thank you very much, Jack, and we'll catch up with you guys in part 3.